Hello and welcome. Squadron Supreme is one of Marvel's most bizarre, slightly mishandled teams. There's very few complete stories, one of which is the focus of this video. But the Squadron has been around, off and on, for many years, and they've had more than a few iterations. They start as a parody, or homage, or rip-off, depending on your point of view, before spinning off in their own direction. After the 12-issue series in question, the team was effectively put on ice for many years, until it was revived in the early 2000s. So let's briefly look at the early days of the team, how it evolved, and what led to the 12-issue series that is usually compared to Watchmen. Squadron Supreme begins as Squadron Sinister in Avengers number 69. Although that appearance is merely one panel, the next issue is when they're properly introduced. The setup is, Kang and the Grandmaster agree to a game where both select champions to represent them. Should Kang win, he'll receive all the power he wants. If he loses, it's sweet oblivion. Kang bribes the Avengers to fight for him, and Grandmaster selects Squadron Sinister. As we learn, the Squadron was created by Grandmaster to defeat the 4 chosen Avengers. These 4 challengers are Dr. Spectrum, Hyperion, Nighthawk, who is a different but similar version of Nighthawk from the Defenders, and Whizzer. It's no secret these characters are disguised copies of Justice League members. Although Whizzer is a reused character from Marvel's Golden Age, still he's obviously a stand-in for the Flash. The battle kind of goes nowhere, and the Squadron unceremoniously disappear as the story veers off in another direction. The team next appears in Avengers number 85. Except this time, they're Squadron Supreme and have a number of new members. Again, there's still a parallel to the Justice League, but they're not the same people the Avengers previously met. They're heroes from another dimension, not creations of Grandmaster. Even though the cover of Avengers number 141 says the Squadron Sinister returns, it's actually the Squadron Supreme, as the Wizard explains in that issue. You'd think they'd correct the cover, instead of throwing in a line of forced dialogue, but I guess not. Anyway, this is the sellout version of the Squadron, who fight on behalf of the Roxxon Corporation and the power-mad billionaire president of the United States, Nelson Rockefeller. Insert your own modern parallels here. With the Avengers' help, the Squadron's world is freed from tyranny. Skipping forward a bit, this brings us to Defenders, issue number 112. This directly ties into the well-known Squadron Supreme series from 1985. When President Rockefeller resigns, Kyle Richmond is elected president. He's then corrupted by an alien called Overmind. Overmind is actually a manifestation of the Eternals joined together, but I don't want to get into that and deviate too much here. Using fear and misinformation, undesirables and subversives are rounded up and, well, let's cut to the chase. America becomes a totalitarian regime. Of course, Overmind's ultimate goal is to take over the world, and that's when the Squadron decides to resist. The Defenders help out and free the world from Overmind's control. Although technically, the big bad was secretly Null, the living darkness, but whatever, same difference. The Squadron's world is now free from control, but in disarray. This is where the Squadron Supreme series picks up. The series begins with rescue and relief efforts to clean up the mess made by Overmind's control. At a team meeting, they acknowledge their credibility is in the toilet, and they have to do something to achieve public forgiveness for their direct participation in the prior dictatorship. Both Wonder Woman and Superman, Power Princess and Hyperion, argue that the moral, responsible thing to do would be to take charge themselves and create a utopian state. Instead of simply reacting to criminal acts, they should be proactive and solve all the world's problems. That would be the right thing to do. Nighthawk, argues that a perfect world given to humanity is vastly different than one that's earned. However, the majority of the team disagree, and they vote to use their power to assume control and force the world to conform to their standard. They also decide to change the world within 1 year. Now, I know that's a pretty harsh reading, but it's not wrong. The argument is that the Squadron Supreme should become a dictatorship to replace the prior one. The decision is arrived at democratically, But really, 12 people with power deciding the fate of the world is the complete opposite of a democratic choice for everyone else. Furthermore, Hyperion, the team leader, is the most powerful among them. While the majority may actually agree with him, they also know, on some level, they can't go against him. If he's determined to follow through with this plan, there's not a lot anyone can do to stop him. Put in that context, Hyperion and Power Princess offer an ultimatum, not an actual choice. Sure, their motives are pure, they simply want to help, and you could argue they are, technically, the best humanity has to offer. Except that the two main proponents of the plan are a genetically modified woman from a segregated society that left the planet, and an alien who has adopted this world but rejects its values. Due to their origin and experience, their objectivity or ability to relate to the human condition is highly questionable. Although, in the final issue, it is revealed, or retconned, that Hyperion is actually a highly advanced human being, not an alien. However, the point stands because, until that point, he believes he's an alien. By the way, this isn't a critique of the story. I'm bringing up the complex questions and ethics that lie below the surface, because it is a straightforward, earnest premise. The intentions are explicit, and most would agree they are honorable. It's the execution and ramifications that will determine just how pure those intentions turn out to be. The double-sized issue ends with Nighthawk struggling to assassinate Hyperion and ending this movement before it begins. However, he cannot. To highlight how Hyperion is willing to take extreme measures to achieve the utopian goal, when the bad guy, Scarlet Centurion, appears to issue a challenge, Hyperion straight up says he'll murder him if he attacks Earth. Scarlet Centurion retreats instead of pressing the matter. The Atom, Tom Thumb, feels displaced and ignored by the team. He withdraws to his lab to work on inventions instead of working in the field. Nuke suspects the radiation he emits has given his dying parents cancer, so he asks Tom to find a cure. Tom discovers that curing cancer is well beyond his abilities. He even tries to make a deal with Scarlet Centurion, who lives well into the future where all disease has been cured. However, Scarlet Centurion wants Tom to kill Hyperion in exchange for a cure. Tom cannot agree. He returns to the present and informs Nuke of his failure. This is not news Nuke takes well. In an ironic twist, Tom discovers he also has cancer. While the squadron begins to rid the world of weapons, Dr. Spectrum finds and confronts Nuke, whose parents have recently died. Nuke is an emotional mess, and in an effort to restrain him, Spectrum accidentally kills Nuke. Surprisingly, both the squadron and Nuke's younger brother basically justify it as a necessary death. The anti-weapon crusade continues. Tom, who kind of missed the message in A Clockwork Orange, invents a machine that will cure criminals of bad behavior. Well, it will cure anyone of any behavior, given the proper commands. But the intended purpose is to offer criminals a way to be released from jail by permanently modifying their behavior. There is a brief objection to the procedure, but it's argued if someone doesn't live within the arbitrary, socially acceptable rules, that person has given up the right to decide their own actions. They must be forced to conform for the greater good. Of course, that's a greater good decided by only 12 people. The team votes to use this behavior modification device. At this point, the squadron embraces being dictators. Freedom of choice has become an illusion. After all, this procedure is not a choice. It's an ultimatum disguised as an option. Except, it's not optional. Green Arrow asks Golden Archer asks Lady Lark to marry him. She rejects him, so Golden Archer drugs her and changes her mind with the indoctrination machine. This will not turn out well. In the following issue, Golden Archer and members of the squadron's family are abducted by the Institute of Evil. I suspect these baddies are loosely based on the Brotherhood of Evil from Doom Patrol, or a blend of both those teams. Anyway, this kidnapping scheme is easily foiled. The team constructs and occupies a hidden city to act as their base of operations. The former Institute members are then brainwashed and made members of the squadron. Amphibian finally decides he's had enough of this fascist plot and leaves the team. It's then revealed that Golden Archer changed Lady Lark's brain so she would love him. Both members also leave the team, so there are major fractures beginning to form. As an observation, the series began as solving the world's problems, but at this point, it's entirely focused on America, so its scope narrowed dramatically. Of course, this implies an egocentric point of view where changing America changes the world by default. Anyway, the story stops being about the world and just focuses on changing America. The villain, Master Menace, rescues the first Hyperion, the one created back in Avengers number 70, to replace the current Hyperion and destroy the squadron from within. This plan actually works. However, the replacement Hyperion falls in love with Power Princess, and he decides to kill her husband, seduce her, and permanently stay on this world. He then trashes Master Menace's equipment, and the villain has to escape to the Purgatory dimension where he found this Hyperion. The original Hyperion, who was sent to Purgatory the previous issue, and Master Menace make a deal and work together to escape this realm. After which, Hyperion beats his replacement to death. After the battle and the damage sustained, Hyperion is blind. It's a pretty great allusion to the fact that Hyperion doesn't see how this dictatorship has a lot of resistance to it, nor does he or anyone else see the flaws in their logic and ethics and morals. Desperate and dying, Tom returns to the future to steal the cancer cure from Scarlet Centurion. After doing so, he discovers that centuries of selective breeding has wiped out cancer, not a magical potion. His ethically compromised effort was in vain. In one of the oddest endings for a character and a comic, the final panel announces Tom's death. Tragically, he dies off panel, and ultimately, a failure. One subplot that's been slowly building is Nighthawk recruiting people to take down the Squadron. 2 of these recruits become members of the Squadron. Meanwhile, the Squadron decide to put all dead people into suspended animation until they can cure death. One of Nighthawk's crew steals the plan to the behavior modification device and sends it to Master Menace. Master Menace then alters the machine to reverse the process and restore those modified to their original state. Former members of the Institute of Evil are kidnapped, change back to themselves, and join with Nighthawk to take the Squadron down. A member of the Squadron discovers this plot. Nighthawk has to accept a necessary evil by changing this person's memories to prevent the plan from being revealed. As promised, the Squadron steps down and restores power to the American government. After which, Nighthawk confronts and attacks the Squadron. The battle leaves a number of members on either side dead, including Nighthawk. Before that, Nighthawk argues that Hyperion's Utopia only works if there are always people with the best intentions running it, which is something that can never be guaranteed. What they've forced on America is tenuous and easily exploited. Finally seeing the error of his ways, Hyperion disbands the Squadron and promises to undo all the changes they've made. Overall, Squadron Supreme argues for free will and freedom of choice. Neither are a group decision. They are, and should remain, choices for an individual. Society as a whole may dislike those individual choices and feel it's necessary to take action against them. But suppressing and forcing a person into a narrow window of conformity is incompatible with the human experience. It limits basic, immutable human rights to those that have been deemed worthwhile. Put another way, give people tools and they will use them. Force them to use those same tools and they will break them. Superheroes, as icons of the best aspects and intentions of humanity, are unable to thread the moral and ethical needle of benevolent authoritarianism. That's the message. That level of assumed force control is a power no one should be permitted to use. No one, not ever, not under any circumstances. Because even the best of us are flawed and have blind spots, and that's presuming the best intentions. One popular talking point is that Squadron Supreme and Watchmen are quite similar. Whereas the chapter heading implied, Squadron Supreme is sometimes called Watchmen before Watchmen. Naturally, I have an opinion and a few arguments to back it up. So are Watchmen and Squadron Supreme similar? Well, no. I can already hear the angry mob forming outside my apartment, but hear me out. The only way to compare the two is on a very, very basic level. Boiling them down to their core theme, one could say they are both about the difficult moral and ethical choices one must make to save the world. Admittedly, it could be argued they are two different approaches to the same problem. On that level, sure, the two have similarities. However, it's the specifics where the comparison falls apart. One can't say both are about a group of superheroes saving the world. Because, in Watchmen, there's only one person with a plan, Adrian Veidt. Everyone else is spinning their wheels, thinking it's a murder mystery they're solving. They're completely oblivious to what's actually going on. Furthermore, no one, other than Dr. Manhattan, has any powers. They are simply normal people in garish costumes. So Watchmen isn't about superheroes saving the world. It's about a megalomaniac with a vision, taking extreme action to hide his plan by nullifying the only superhero and misdirecting everyone else. Despite appearances, or recent sequels, whether the world is actually saved is kind of the point of the ending. In Squadron Supreme, world domination, which simplifies to American tyranny, is a group decision amongst a number of people with actual superpowers. So they decide to become benevolent dictators and remove all the elements they perceive as leading to conflict. They are not subtle. They are very public and take actions that are not kept secret. They apply force rather than guide change. And ultimately, they fail. It's not ambiguous. It can't be ambiguous, or it undermines the overall message. Going a level deeper, Watchmen unites the world against a common enemy. The conflict humanity usually inflict upon themselves is deferred to an outside source. Their aggression is redirected. In Squadron Supreme, the underlying conflict most people express towards one thing or another is not redirected. It's told to be suppressed. If there's resistance, it's forcibly suppressed with overwhelming power and technology. Watchmen is an attempt to unite the world and get the powers that be to work together through deception, while Squadron divides the world into who has power and who does not. And those in power make the choices that determine what those without it can and cannot do. See, once you broaden the scope and actually compare them beyond a fundamental level, a comparison falls apart in a matter of seconds. More to the point, Squadron is a cautionary tale about the dangers of people with power assuming all the power. It quickly leads to a democracy becoming a dictatorship. There are many real historical antecedents that support that conclusion. Which may seem like a cynical point of view, but it's simply how fascism always plays out. It promises something it will not deliver. If a comparison is to be made, I would suggest The Authority indirectly borrows from Squadron Supreme. Both teams tell the world they are watching and will take action when people step out of line. The similarity is rather noticeable. A closer comparison would be Injustice. I don't want to spoil the inciting incident, but Superman decides, you know what, I'm going to stop being so restrained. Cutting to the chase, he becomes a dictator, with Wonder Woman at his side, while Batman finds a way to unite others against Superman. If you're talking fundamentals, Injustice is Squadron Supreme through a more violent, modern lens. An even more recent series that looks at the same issues is Power Fantasy. It's not a direct parallel, but it explores similar ethical and moral questions. Nowadays, I think a modern audience will see the complexity of Squadron Supreme's theme and its approach, but they will also recognize it's kind of quaint in its execution. It highlights a lot of problems, but due to it being intended for a young, mainstream audience, it's mostly surface level and abrupt when examining those issues. Which doesn't make it terrible. I don't want to imply that whatsoever. It's appropriate for the audience it was directed at, and it's admirable for trying to have something to say, or at the very least, giving a reader something to think through without telling them what the response should be. I was going to end this video with the direct follow-up by the same creative team, and then the various reboots in the early part of the millennium. However, just looking at the series took a lot longer than I expected, so I'll save everything for a later time. But, just to give you the highlights, this series was followed by the graphic novel Death of a Universe. After that, the Squadron did make appearances here and there, But the next major update was a Marvel Max reboot in 2003. That would last 18 issues, with numerous tie-in miniseries, before being rebooted again as a mainstream Marvel title. That series died out after 7 issues. The writer, J. Michael Straczynski, thought the new restraints he faced affected the quality of his writing, and he couldn't continue. So the series ends at the beginning of a new story that has never been finished. After a forced crossover with the Ultimate Universe, Squadron Supreme was rebooted once again, and it would last 12 issues. A 4-issue Marvel Max series was published, and that seemingly did nothing to revive the more adult version of the team. Finally, in 2016, after the events of Secret War, various members of various iterations of Squadron Supreme and one member from the new universe title, DP7, come together to form a new team on the 616 Earth. This title, like Captain Britain and MI-13, had unfortunate timing. Both were strong, but they were undermined by the ongoing saga of the Marvel Universe. They had to pause their main story to integrate crossover events, which was not ideal for a title struggling to find its identity in a market flooded with competition. The series would last a mere 15 issues. It's complete but abrupt. There you go, that's a sketch of the team following the well-remembered 1985 series. Thank you for watching. Yeah, like Squadron Supreme, that was a pretty abrupt ending. But I thought I'd said all that needed to be said, and the summary I wrote sounded, a little tedious. It didn't add anything except time, and I got bored reading it out loud. So I figured I'd said enough already, and cut it. Goodbye, my darling. Please subscribe, like, and all that engagement stuff, and turn on notifications, because the algorithm is notoriously, let's call it, finicky. Naturally, I'd like to take a moment and thank all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. Times are a little tough at the moment, so I really appreciate that ongoing support. It does make a difference, so thank you. Extra special thanks to Chapel Pluto, John Woolham, Plutocracy, Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You were all justified and ancient. Until next time. Hey look, a classic ending. Cool.